the best performing fund, the aspirational brand that they would want to, for example, if they're a founder or aspiring founder, the aspirational name that they want to reach out to and want to get funded by. If they're a capital allocator, the aspirational name they wish they had access to and would like to place their money in. Has a net profit margin after tax of something like 55% of their revenues.
The person who I love to surround myself with are those people who are just free thinkers, the radical thinkers. You have a sense of autonomy and come to the right question.
The person has allowed themselves to become vulnerable because I know there's no filters there. I'm getting the raw information. I'm not being fed a prepared sales pitch for my consumption, for me to feel good about it. What we have done over the last 6 years or so has allowed us to build up a position of privilege and unfair advantage where, at least in my worldview, it's our game to lose now.
Right when you start, kind of coloring outside the lines of the thesis, the structure, reaching for the sake of reaching, I think that's when it becomes very dangerous. And you start seeing just a decayed nature of those funds and firms.
Okay, Adam and Shub, here we are again. So episode 10, Destination. So I think we'll dive into a little bit about your personal journeys into venture capital, your style of investing and also advising startups. Then we'll look at the vision, the future of Foundamental, and perhaps a little bit of construction and where we see the market going. So who wants to go first?
Cool.
Take it off, my man.
I will do just that. So I came to Fundamental traditional professional arc. Prior to Fundamental as a venture fund that was more in the late stage, more pre-IPO stage, and we were investing in companies more or less that you would check in every quarter, and that's pretty much what you check in every quarter how the company was doing, and more or less the company was at a certain scale, at a certain trajectory, that there wasn't really much insight or guidance that you would be able to provide to these firms, and that was fun, but it really wasn't engaging. You become like this armchair investor, and that's what ultimately led to wanting to start something new, albeit I didn't know in what direction, if it was going to be a generalist or a sector approach. But there's a few outlier companies that we invested in at that time, at my last fund, that were earlier stage in the company life cycle. And I really just fell in love with working with those entrepreneurs at an earlier point. It becomes very messy, but I think that's where the magic happens. And that was kind of like my call to action to at least start and dedicate more of my time to founders, really at its most earliest point in the company building, starting up process. So a little bit different than yours?
Yeah, for me, actually getting into venture capital was a beautiful accident, I have to say. So, rolling back the years, so I actually tried my hand at being a founder myself. Was running an e-commerce store for diamonds and precious jewelry. Tough business. Ironically, couldn't raise any external capital at all. Eventually had to shut the business down. And at that point, so this is like 2013, 2014-ish, right? So that time I was figuring out what next to do in life. And for me, the obvious decision next was to take up some sort of a growth role in another startup. Then through a mutual friend of mine, they connected me to a person running an early stage fund in India called K Capital. In fact, I remember the very first meeting I had with the guy who eventually ended up becoming my future boss. I even told him, hey, I have no idea why we are meeting other than the fact that our mutual friend connected us.
Yeah.
How old were you?
I was 28 at the time. I guess by today's VC definition, it's quite old, quite the senior citizen. People are getting in younger and younger these days into VC. So I even told him, I have no idea why we are talking. I most certainly am not an investor. I don't fit into anything. I have no understanding of how to evaluate deals. So I have no idea why you're talking, why you would have interest in me. And he said something quite fascinating that, hey, we're looking for a failed entrepreneur. I thought, okay, what an interesting way to hook me into the conversation, right? And I guess that got me started. And I mean, they did the usual thing, I guess, which people do to test people with some of those things we do as well to judge candidates. And I thought, hey, you know what? This is tremendously fun. And if someone's going to pay me to do this, sure, I'll sign up.
Yeah.
And for me, that was like a beautiful 4-year journey that got me started at K. The highlight for me was marked by getting to lead the very first round of a company called Zetwork, which today has become the world's largest manufacturing marketplace. And it's been a tremendous success story for everyone involved. Along the way, we had like a work trip in China, which was for me like an eye-opening experience. This was in 2017-ish. And if you rewind back to what the world, the venture, the narrative in general was about China in 2017, and I got to see like Beijing, which to me seemed like almost like a futuristic and a slightly dystopian version of New York. That's what it seemed like to me. And I thought, man, like if only I was part of a setup where I could access learnings from all over the world, perhaps I can scale myself up and apply myself. I can multiply myself manyfold. And that's kind of what got me started on what other things I should be doing in life. And ultimately that sort of, climaxed into starting Foundamental.
Interesting point. What are your personal investment styles and philosophies?
Cool. Investment philosophies. I think everyone has their unique craft and approach to investing, and what we tried to advocate and enable, certainly push on some of the younger colleagues here is, I think you have to find and then develop your own crafts to being successful, within this industry. I think you have to be very authentic, and it's all about kind of refine. At least for me, I usually over index on the founder, and I at times use my gut as like a good bellwether to some degree. As if I'm thinking if the firm or founders that are presenting are maybe onto something, I usually key into maybe my gut a little bit more than probably most, and I guess for identifying maybe trends, or like maybe thinking more deeply about here's some like white space areas or some areas to evolve our thesis. I just tried to be, I hear the Bob Dylan's, he'd always say, stay observant. I think it's always been observance to kind of, the actors or the archetypes, the people that you're investing, in, how are they developing, like where their deep tissue pain points, and then kind of essentially working from, kind of first principles from there and reshifting, the thesis accordingly.
Nice. I mean, I wish I could articulate it as eloquently as that. I think over the years, and even on a continuous basis, what I look for has generally changed and evolved. When I started, I think I had like a disproportionate indexation towards quality of teams, in the sense you can rationalize everything if you think you found like an amazing founder team or founder setup. After that, I switched to a frame of mind where, in my mind, market became paramount, in the sense very large markets with underserved white space opportunities are what would get me interested, and look for whoever is the winner there. And I think I still have sort of held on to that as something that excites me. I think what in recent years, the last 2-3 years, what I have kind of developed a real liking for is to combine large white space market opportunities with businesses that have some sort of what I refer to as toll booth like characteristics. And what do I mean by that? In the sense, you can sort of act as a toll booth on a highway, the highway here being the market opportunity. And if you have enough brand power, which you've built either through sheer execution or credibility in the market, by your sheer existence, you have earned the right to collect some money from whoever is the market participant here. And I think what at least in my frame of thinking, most great businesses that we know of and take for granted have some toll booth like characteristics without many of us even realizing that that's happening. I mean, just for example, one phenomenal business model that appeals to me, which I wish more people would talk about it, are companies like Visa and MasterCard, right? I don't know if any of you know this, but Visa has a net profit margin after tax of something like 55% of their revenues.
Beautiful.
Which is unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
Like how many businesses do we know? Not at a gross margin, not EBITDA.
Yeah.
This is after paying tax.
For sure.
That is insane, right? That to me is a toll booth business.
I mean, 2% every time you swipe that card, it's like, and think about the over-dependence on some of these markets, especially in the States. They're very card driven.
Yeah.
So like, they're pretty much, no one's carrying cash. Everything is purchased and procured via, swiping the card that's in your wallet. But you're absolutely right. Those business models are.
And it's just happening because we have accepted it into our lives, and it is the toll booth we have signed up for happily. And I think this can happen through software layers. This can happen through physical infrastructure, supply chain layers. But that's the kind of business I want to be involved with in my capacity as an investor.
Right. Yeah. And I think and how this evolves each respective GP, and I guess anyone at the firm has their own approach, and it's really kind of speaks to the diversity at the fund. Diversity of thoughts. Not having this groupthink, and it's rewarding those who are thinking differently and not having this. Hiring people just to say yes, you're absolutely right. You become this emperor with no clothes, and so you need to really you need to surround yourself with very smart, capable, determined people that would have convictions that will challenge say an analyst challenging a general partner, and feeling okay and emboldened to actually challenge that. So you need to have diversity of thought. I think is very critical. And crucial to the success of Fundamental, I think, and the success moving forward. I think if you really kind of distill successful investors within the ecosystem from say great to good, I always landed on the ability to, given a person infinite amount of time, they're gonna stumble upon the right question to ask that's gonna dismantle this house of cards. Right? It's going to be like, okay, I don't want to invest in you, or do want to invest in you, right? A given amount of time, you're going to find out the right question to ask, and be like, okay, it's not for me, or it's right for me. And there's people who are just have an unerring ability to hone in on the right questions, and that takes time and reinforcing of what questions to ask, what type of business models I've seen, what characteristics of this founder, how are you hiring, and so the faster you can get to that right question. It's just rinse and repeat, because it's you're seeing so many companies during a day, and so I think the person who I love to surround myself with are those people who are just free thinkers, the radical thinkers. You have a sense of autonomy, and come to the right question the soonest, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And I think if you surround yourself with a lot of those independent radical thinkers, I think everyone, it's like a rising tide. Everyone will be more successful for having those individuals around you.
So in episode 4 or 5, we spoke about vulnerability within founders and handling discomfort, and that's a way that Fundamental work with is something a term you use when you work with your founders, but obviously there's some individual styles. So Shub, what's your individual way of, and if there's any, that we said in the previous episode, superpowers too, that you bring to the founders whilst you're working with them?
So look, what I like to create, ideally serendipitously, but if not through by navigating conversations, is to allow for enough opportunities to emerge where founders openly talk about either their failings in the past or their weaknesses and what's missing in the current setup, what is likely to go wrong or what may go wrong, and what the limits of their abilities are. And and this is used more as an opportunity, not what I try to do is not so much, hey, you know what, I'll now interrogate you and I'll see if you cave. The idea is to say, hey, can you and I be, as close as siblings, for example, because that's kind of like a safe space you can get to with a sibling, your brother or sister or whoever. And in other words, I want it to be like a partnership where I'll look out for you and I want to know if you look out for me. And if you can't demonstrate to me that you can allow yourself to become vulnerable as an act of showing that, we are partners, then I'll probably also have to operate from a distance because you're not allowing me to get closer to you, if you know what I mean. And in at least the way I choose to operate now, I would prefer to operate knowing that the person has allowed themselves to become vulnerable because I know there's no filters there. I'm getting the raw information. I'm not being fed a prepared sales pitch for my consumption, for me to feel good about it. Because keep in mind, regardless of how the journey is going now, eventually, over a long period of operation, there'll be at least one or two times where the news will get very, very bad, right? Each of the great companies we have spoken about during this series, they've gone through some hideous times, right? And if you only choose to present that bad news to me when it's unavoidable or if I'm hearing it from the outside world, frankly, at that point, I will have no choice but to assume the worst. Because you have trained me as such. You've only trained me to hear good news from yourself. So that's perhaps gives you a little bit of a flavor of how I operate.
And that's actually what he's saying is, in what he's able to do is very. It's not easy. I think what he's certainly what he's describing and what he's accomplished of inviting someone new to be so vulnerable of like shortcomings, and that's very hard for anyone to do. Like it's usually like I just want to sweep things under the rug, or kind of maybe I'll give you a varnished version, but to like be very presentable and like very vulnerable of like shortcomings, especially a net new relationship, that takes a lot of trust. And if you can essentially provide that right when you invest, I mean that is a superpower. It's enabling you to feel so comfortable with me that there's not going to be repercussions immediately after, right? It's like I'm going to give you the raw data, and you're not going to immediately be my enemy. It's like we're going to work this out together. It's not going to be, hey, Adam versus Shu versus whomever. I mean, that's like a superpower. It really is, and it's very hard for a lot of people to get to that level. It's almost like this, like a Jedi mind trick. It's like, I think it's worth elevating again. It is his superpower, and it's very hard to replicate or mimic or emulate.
Now you may be wondering, hey, fine, you're embellishing all of these things. Does it actually have any residual value for either Foundamental or the portfolio founders involved? I would argue these sorts of situations, if they're well played out, the value is unlocked during tough times, like kind of like the times we've seen in the last 2 years or so. Because we've often been in situations where, for example, there isn't as much of or there is more of a trust deficit, and not as much trust as we would like, or as much
as we thought
transparency as we like. And then what happens is you end up wasting a ton of time just staging like a negotiation.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, for example, a company needs an additional infusion of capital, right? You can try to massage the whole situation by saying, this happened and that happened and it's not my responsibility, so I need this and that. But I mean, any intelligent investor will be able to see through it. And then if you haven't built up a track record of trust, it's like you've built up this house of cards, and now you have to keep explaining yourself at each level. Whereas if you have a foundation of trust, I mean, even in the companies where we have the closest trust, you can wrap these things up in like a 10-minute conversation as soon as you have thought of it. You don't need to stage this thing over like weeks and months of negotiation.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the disclaimer, like this long-winded disclaimer, and then you drop the bad news. It's like just come out, just hit me with the raw, sledgehammer of the bad news. I'm willing, like we're so close that I could absorb that and not feel like I'm going to have some repercussions. And that's how think about it. It's as again we've said multiple times, the arc of the successful or any startup is, there's some outliers that do this, but it's anything but from up and to the right. It's peaks and troughs, and I think how you manage those troughs is it really gets to build a great successful company. I think, and how you manage those troughs is you you surround yourself with people who are essentially are agents of good, who are going to essentially advise you to get around the most difficult points in time in your company journey. And the only way to do that is to be completely vulnerable and be forthright and transparent. And if you're not, that trough is just going to keep going better and better, longer and longer. And you're going to be shooting your both feet at the same time, and it's just like you're going to be it's just the wrong tack to do it, because a lot of founders have egos and like, well, I don't want to present the really the worst news, and now they're going to think less of me, and it's this ego gets in a way a lot of founders be able to get around and pirouette around some very tough, sluggish times.
Thanks for sharing that. So speaking of destinations, we need to touch on challenges and opportunities when you grow and scale Fundamental. Maybe we can start from challenges, or you can connect them with opportunities as well.
Sure. Did you want to know more about challenges in building Fundamental to what it is today, or were you thinking of a different direction?
Looking ahead.
I see. I mean, look, so constant reminder to all of us, and especially to us, in spite of all the things we have said, I think the game has only just started for construction tech or AECS tech, right? So in my opinion, what we have done over the last 6 years or so has allowed us to build up a position of privilege and unfair advantage where, I mean, at least in my worldview, it's our game to lose now. But that also means that we haven't won the game yet, right? So therefore we need to keep going, and it would be a real shame if we sort of got ahead of ourselves, took things for granted, became complacent, and rested on our laurels, which is why obviously we have this one over here, right? And therefore I think it's important for us to know that the game is evolving. We need to keep anticipating what new opportunities may represent vertical singularities for us, right? And also with any opportunity that's there for the taking, to expect competition and intense competition. And that's basically some of the challenges I foresee.
Yeah, it's trying to be shying away from being a victim of your success, right? And it's why recreate the wheel, or if it's not broke, don't fix it. Or raising a huge mega fund that kind of is not successful to the model that's made you successful. And I think it's like staying true to what got you there, and not deviate, not kind of, as I mentioned before, growth for the sake of growth, and trying to experiment. I'm going to reach for to move in multiple different directions for the sake of, I think is good, or is going to better the fund's long-term trajectory. I think that's when you start seeing erosion or decaying of the fund. I think if you stay true to the ethos, and you don't deviate, what really got you to this place of success, then I think you'll be fine. But I think right when you start kind of coloring outside the lines of the thesis, the structure, reaching for the sake of reaching, I think that's when it becomes very dangerous, and you start seeing just a decayed nature of those funds and firms.
I mean, borrowing from a discussion in the previous episode on incumbents and what they've been doing, I think we kind of find ourselves in this unique position, depending on your worldview, either uniquely advantageous or uniquely challenging, where we have the opportunities and challenges, both of being an incumbent and an emerging challenger, right? So I think it's up to us to hopefully use it as an advantage of being simultaneously in both these positions, and to build on it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. We can say.
I was just gonna say, like, just rinse and repeat. There's no reason to be like overly creative just to be creative and complex. I think that's the moment when you inject more variables into the equation, there's more variables to to master. And then you have the higher probability that you're ultimately not going to be as successful as you once were. It's just, why take the risk? Why deviate away from a recipe that's worked for you?
Yeah, just so mindset must come to this, because clearly you guys are a highly specialist firm. You operate in different ways to how, let's say, a typical VC works. So does doubt ever settle in your minds, or?
As a challenge, you mean?
Yeah.
I actually find it, for myself personally, I find it liberating and refreshing, and it takes away the pressure. I mean, I think what, at least for me, I gave up like several years ago, is this feeling that I need to conform to
Yes.
the expectations or the norms of being a typical VC.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you want to go down that path of what a typical VC constitutes.
We've been there.
We've done it enough.
So, but mind you, I mean, even though I'm trivializing it over here, I can tell you the vast majority of VC professionals actually grapple with that as a problem, and they feel this sense of peer pressure or urge that conforming is the way to get ahead in their respective careers. At least for me, once I think you get out of it, I think it's very liberating.
Yeah, absolutely. To carry on the theme of I brought up Bob Dylan. It's the Frank Sinatra. He's like, I did it my way. It's like I don't want to conform or draft of others. There is some liberty and some freedom of choosing the path that you feel excited to go down, and not feel the pressures to conform just for conformity's sake, or just to be popular, or hey, this is what the rest of the herd is doing, so I should probably mimic them to be accepted. I think right when you start trending the line of I'm doing this, I'm doing X or doing Y to be liked or to conform, I think you're doomed to fail. And plus, I don't like to be painted in a box, and I like to have some autonomy and think differently, and I think that's ultimately what I think has led us to be successful.
So let's say I'm going to put you on the spot now. So 5 years from now, if someone hears Fundamental within context of investing in construction technology, what should they think?
The best performing fund, the aspirational brand that they would want to, for example, if they're a founder or aspiring founder, the aspirational name that they want to reach out to and want to get funded by. If they're a capital allocator, the aspirational name they wish they had access to and would like to place their money in. Anyone else, a brand that they want to be associated with in some capacity.
Yeah, I would say if you really want to distill it down to a few words, is to be a gold standard. You want to. Maybe not to seek success, but maybe I think looking back, it's we helped some of these firms kind of grow or help accelerate the firm's success. I think looking back, I think I would be very much more happy, and if that were the case, and then of just saying Fundamental is super great. Meaning if we could point to the point in time that we were demonstrated irrefutable evidence that we've took this firm or firms into a new heights. I think looking back, I think I'd be fine and very happy with that outcome.
Feels like we're on fertile ground to be that company, for sure. So we spoke previously, and maybe people will pick up on this, about the idea of a coherent culture and contrarian mindset as Fundamental grows. So why do you believe that that's an important factor and essential to the long-term success of the firm?
I mean, yeah, contrarian. I mean, I get if you're mimicking the herd, then it's regression to the mean, as I said before, right? You want to be contrarian, you want to think outside of the box, and that's where the power law exists, right? But you have to be contrarian and right. It's not just to be contrarian's sake, right? Contrarian and wrong is still wrong. You know what I'm saying? You got to have both variables in the equation. So I think that leads to consistent power law, right? Just being first principled, not being swept up with herd mentality. If you get swept up to herd mentality, you look at that you're going to average returns. So I think it's just a constant refreshing of that mindset on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, I would say just piggybacking off of what you said, assuming that you have a way to be contrarian and right a decent number of times, I think you need to have a certain unifying culture, or at least a certain respect for viewpoints and a process that enables all of it. Otherwise, I think to maintain contrarian or a set of contrarian personalities or different or a set of people who have differing and maybe contrarian views, for any length of time, you need a unifying culture to enable that and to respect and foster that. I mean, I just see it as a necessity. You cannot have a contrarian mindset for years at a time without the other piece coming into play on the enabling culture.
What are your predictions for the future of architecture, engineering, construction, and supply chains? And what is the role of technology in shaping of the built world?
I guess I would rest on the earlier prediction. I said that this year plus beginning of the first quarter of next year is going to be the amount of acquisitions is going to be an unprecedented rate in amount in terms of just aggregate dollars and then I think just aggregate amount of deals. I'd be very shocked if that doesn't happen. I'll bet some hard money that's probably likely going to be the case.
And the cause of that is rates?
I would say it's more of incumbents. It's forcing incumbents to dance, to get off their lazy behind, resting on their laurels, to noticing that these firms are now going to be eating their margins. They're going to be stealing away their customers, so they have to act. It's either they're going to innovate in-house, which I haven't seen that happen, for many years, or they're going to just use what they've known to be effective is just using this cash reserve as a means of acquiring these firms and still be relevant. So I think that's a major prediction that with the next, call it 4 quarters. Yeah, leave it at that.
What was your question about the near-term future of AECS or longer term?
I think we can't predict much longer term. Let's say from now to 5 years from now. It's still a long time, really.
Yeah, I mean, I'll actually double
take as
down.
much time as you want.
Okay. Let's go with 5 years. I think beyond that, I mean, I wish I could predict accurately into a 5-year timeline. I'll probably double down on what I said in our previous discussion on incumbents. I think the most likely set of disruptors or incumbents or new next generation of incumbents in this industry will actually not look like groundbreaking firms. They'll seem like firms which are more or less doing what the incumbents are doing, but a little bit better, a little bit faster, a little bit cheaper, a little bit more efficiently. And that's what has allowed them to scale and take market share rapidly.
Very nice. So for the next generation that are coming through of founders in the space, any words of inspiration that you could offer to them?
I mean, imagine that it's 1995 and someone told you that you've been handpicked to become an internet entrepreneur, right? It's the opportunity of several lifetimes ahead of you, right? If you know what you're doing, you can keep building and building and building over and over again. And if you allow yourself 30 years, you actually have enough runway to build a multi-trillion-dollar market cap, right? As of today's rates, looking 30 years forward into the future, I don't know, maybe it'll be tens of trillions in market cap. So, although now that I think about it, I don't know if the market size in AECS supports that. So let's go with trillions. Right? So let's go with trillions in market cap. But hey, that's the opportunity staring at you in the face. Although I'll again contradict myself once again. I think in 1995, no one would have guessed that internet has an addressable market in the trillions. What do I know, right? So, that's what I would say to entrepreneurs.
I'd say don't get discouraged, and just to piggyback off what Shub was saying is that we're so early in this point in time in the evolution of this industry. You always use baseball. There's innings and the game of baseball. It's like it's not even in inning one. Like we just got into the parking lot. So like there's many years to come. And to be patient, allow things to unfold, don't be too rash and move in haste. I think that's probably the number one misstep I see founders is they don't allow proper time to have things like unwind, and they kind of act a little bit too much in haste. But yeah, just having conviction in themselves, and just have just a shit ton of grit, tenacity, and with a healthy dose of empathy.
Right.
Are you inspired?
I am. I've been inspired for the last 2 days. Yeah, pretty much. Do you want to talk about trainers and body warmers?
Yeah. Bit of fun with you guys.
Mm-hmm.
As we've had some
Bring it
fun.
on.
Bring it on.
So, the observation I made, actually one of the first things when I met Patrick and put up a LinkedIn post about the fact that I'd never seen him wear a Patagonia body warmer before, which completely confused me because I thought that was the dress code for VCs, notwithstanding the trainers. So,
Wait, body warmers is that regarded as a vest? Is that?
Yeah.
What is a body warmer?
Patagonia. Like
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
so I'm quite shocked by the choice of dress code for you guys. Like, can you explain?
I guess it's just being true to our unique individual selves. I guess that underpins that we've kind of been saying we're walking the walk. Not conforming to look like another spreadsheet. Slave of putting on a Patagonia vest and looking like an army of minions. Like, who wants to do that? Same as lame, in my opinion. So look, if you're not I can only be myself. Everyone else is taken. And I think if you do, I think when you become, to really break from being good to great, I think you have to be your authentic self. If you're just like this mirage or you're emulating someone else, like you'll have some, good success, but you won't break through that stratosphere. And I think that's like, I think for Shu, myself, and I think Patrick, I think we're very open and comfortable with presenting our unique, authentic self. Yeah.
I mean, I wish I had something truly insightful to say on this topic. I mean, to be honest, I never have worn anything from Patagonia, never got into it. And as far as I'm concerned, that's that.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like, it's the rebel versus the empire, it's like, who wants to work for the empire,
But you're lying, right? You're actually the biggest fan of Patagonia.
No.
With the belts, no.
Yeah, exactly. So have you guys ever seen I always remember talking about this Rebel Alliance being applied to like startups or just corporations, like the early Macintosh, when like they're in this theater, and this lady walks in and she throws like a hammer at
I think it's an 84 ad.
Yeah, that was so powerful. It was like, this mindless drones, And so I think like, having the autonomy of thinking freely and just being your authentic self, I think is what matters in life, I think, and really trickles and finds its way into day-to-day business.
Mm-hmm. So venture capital is associated with meetings, busyness, dinners, deals. Does it all happen in restaurants, or do you guys cook your own dinners as well sometimes?
I mean, if I modify your question slightly to include cooking my own meals, which may or may not be dinners, I actually cook them quite often, I have to admit.
Nice.
And I enjoy doing it.
Love it.
Maybe about half or more of what I eat, I cook myself. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we are unique of we don't chase the conferences just to go for a free drink and the usual, tomfoolery, bullshit. I think that's like, it's very surface level, In terms of like my own personal life, I don't really cook at all. It's more of just in a form of it's inefficient because like I'm cooking for one, and it's like I'm like I don't want to eat leftovers, so it's easy to just order a meal when I get home. So it's more of just for the sake of efficiency. But in terms of like do we go and do big dinners for with firms or other funds? We really shy away from that. I don't think you really extract meaningful, add value. It's just the usual bullshit, to be honest. And it's like I've seen you before, and we're having a drink. Like
No
I've
substance.
seen this movie play out about a billion times.
I actually find cooking oddly therapeutic and intellectually engaging. In the sense, it's a nice way to pull yourself out of other, the regular VC work, quote unquote, whatever that means, I guess, right? So, and for me, I think it helps. It's a unique form of A/B testing, which somehow I find very fulfilling, because it's kind of, there's visual engagement, there's of course the act of getting to taste what you made, etc. And it allows you, I guess, the flexibility. You try different compositions and so on. In a weird way, it feeds into your, in my case at least, feeds into the framework of, okay, you know what? If I try different recipes, okay, or if I try it in this manner, etc. And in some ways, sometimes it gives me inspiration for how I approach life and work.
Yeah, it's almost like it's. I would say it's like fulfilling, right? I would, but I'm probably a terrible cook. But I'll report back next time we have a next interview.
So I'm glad to hear, Martin, our invite to the general AGM was not lost in the post.
Not at all.
Okay, last one to wrap this series up and this episode. So, any fun? I'll open. This will be a very open question. So, any fun anecdotes you're willing to share, maybe about one another, that will help to humanize the people, you guys who we've been speaking to over the last day? Well, maybe something that would surprise people behind.
I wouldn't say surprise, but like there's always these. Prior to coming out here to Berlin, I was coming out here quite frequently, and jet lag I think affects me more than most. And like we had this first, the story that always gets retold for obvious reasons. But we were first retreats, and we had this breakout sessions, and I was with Shub, and it just so happened that the jet lag was hitting very severely, and like I remember just staring at the side of, like just staring at the ceiling, like I could hear him speaking to me, and I was just so like lost, like and then I looked at him, and he's like, "You okay?"
Yeah, exactly. Verbatim.
Are you okay, sir?
I remember after that, I think you said something, and then I asked you, hey, you have no idea what I was telling you all this while.
And I was like, no.
Yeah.
But are you thinking about something different, or just?
No, I mean, I was just so zoned out, but I was cognizant that I was zoned out. Which like I was so like embarrassed, right? Because this is our first first year. It might have been first year. Yeah. And
first few months actually.
Right. Yeah. And I was so embarrassed, like, okay, this is like, we're gonna really get down to some really great content, and we're gonna really untangle some things, and I'm just staring at the ceiling for like must have been 10-15 minutes.
So it took me, in the beginning, I thought we were having a conversation. I was in the first few seconds, frankly, a bit worried, because he had like this glazed over look, and I was wondering, because when I asked, "Are you okay?" I mean, it was not like a rhetorical question. It genuinely came from a point of concern, because I had this. You get worried, right? Sometimes when someone has this glazed look, and it became clear to me, like clearly what I was saying was no longer registering.
I think I like slowed to react to it, just like slowly looked like this, the camera pan really slowly, like I guess it's funnier if you were there, but I was really I was really out there. I don't know if there's any other.
Anything about Patrick, seeing he's not in this episode.
About Patrick.
I don't know.
I mean, look, we have spoken a great deal about discomfort, and I can tell you, in some of our deal discussions, if you're not familiar with how we discuss stuff, things can get really heated.
Really?
Like as in like really heated. In the sense, if you...
Is the Patrick source of heat?
Quite often. Quite often, right?
No.
But not exclusively so, right? And I think it's kind of who, I guess, we are as individuals. I think we mentioned in an earlier episode that Patrick and I are at the extreme ends of personality types, and Adam, interestingly enough, is like the bridge. He's exactly in between. So if you mapped out our personality types, that's how it plays out. So we kind of have these interesting dynamics where we, figuratively speaking, go at each other's throats in terms of the intensity of the discussion. So sometimes when we have new colleagues joining in, They really wonder if it's curtains over here.
Yeah,
and,
it's like, all right,
things are.
hey, is everything okay? It's a really good point though. So we were talking about finding contrarian bets, right? Contrarian bets like not a lot of people will see, and so if you have three different unique people trying to present a case that I probably wouldn't see, like something things that he or Patrick pick up on, I probably wouldn't pick up initially, and that they lean into, and it's contrarian. Like I probably wouldn't have seen it, and if it's unanimous IC discussion, that's when it gets really heated, right? Because like IC say if he sees something really special that for whatever reason I didn't see, that becomes really heated, and there's been some moments where we've had some new employees, and you just start seeing them look around of like, are we good here? Is the boat taking on water? But if anything, I think that's one of our strengths. Really strong suits. We can really air things out. Leave it. The old saying. The very sports analogy. Leave things on the fields, and then you don't harbor any ill will or So I think we really lucked out with the structure of the team that we built and the two guys that are beside me. So.
Brilliant. I think these heated conversations are a source of great feedback, and that's where you guys are, where you are.
Yeah. Hopefully. Yeah.
Along the lines of everything we've discussed anyway, what they say. So, that brings us to the end.
Cool.
Thank you, Shub. Thank you, Adam.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Patrick.
This whole series has been phenomenal, guys.
It really has
Thank you so
been.
much. What a pleasure it's been.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do it again sometime.
10 more hours. 8 more hours.